The air in my apartment hung heavy, thick with late summer heat. The ceiling fan had given up 2 days ago, its once reliable hum replaced by an ominous silence. I had promised myself I'd fix it, but after several failed attempts, I swallowed my pride and texted Daniel. Daniel, my next-door neighbor, was the kind of man who made everything look effortless. Tall, broad-shouldered, with rough hands that spoke of years in construction, he carried himself with a confidence that was both infuriating and magnetic. We had known each other for a while, friendly in that casual, neighborly way. I knew his routine, the sound of his truck pulling in late at night, the occasional clink of beer bottles on his porch. He was straight. Or, at least, that's what I had always assumed. His reply was immediate. "Yeah, man. Be there in 10. I exhaled slowly, staring at the screen longer than necessary before tossing my phone onto the couch. There was no reason for the sudden tightness in my chest, no reason for my pulse to quicken. It was just Daniel, just a guy helping me out, but I knew better than to lie to myself. The knock came exactly 10 minutes later, firm and expectant. I pulled the door open to find him standing there in a fitted gray t-shirt that clung to his torso, dark jeans hanging low on his hip. He ran a hand through his damp blonde hair, offering a lazy smile. "Hot as hell in here," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Tell me about it." I shut the door, watching as he took in the living room, his gaze flicking to the unmoving ceiling fan. Daniel wasn't just good with his hands. He was the kind of guy who knew he was good with his hands. That kind of self-assurance was dangerous. He moved with an easy confidence, rolling his shoulders as he appraised the problem. "You got a ladder?" "In the hall closet," I said, already heading to get it. When I returned, he had peeled off his shirt, tossing it over the armrest of my couch. "It's too damn hot for all that," he said, flashing a grin. I swallowed hard, pretending not to notice the way his muscles flexed as he reached for the screwdriver in his back pocket. Daniel climbed onto the ladder, and I found myself too aware of his presence. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. I could see the beads of sweat tracing down his spine, disappearing into the waistband of his jeans. "So, what's up?" he asked as he loosened the fan's casing. "Haven't seen you around much." I shrugged, leaning against the wall. "Been busy." "With?" I hesitated. "Work. Life." "Yeah." He glanced down at me, one brow quirked. "And that boyfriend of yours?" The question sent a jolt through me. Did he know? I had never mentioned Ethan to him, at least not directly. Maybe he had seen us together. Maybe he had noticed something I hadn't meant for him to see. "We're good," I said, forcing nonchalance. Daniel let out a low chuckle. That didn't sound convincing. "Since when do you care about my love life?" "I don't," he said, but there was something in his voice, something unreadable. "Just making conversation." He turned his attention back to the fan, the muscles in his arms flexing as he worked. I needed to stop staring. Needed to stop thinking about him like that. But then he cursed under his breath, the screwdriver slipping from his grip. It clattered to the floor between us, and before I could react, he was climbing down, stepping closer, too close. "Sorry, man," he muttered, brushing past me to grab the tool. His bare shoulder grazed my chest, the heat of his skin searing through the thin fabric of my shirt. I swallowed hard. He didn't move away. Neither did I. The silence stretched between us, thick and charged. Daniel looked up at me, something flickering in his expression. I told myself I was imagining it. Told myself I was reading into things that weren't there. But then his gaze flicked to my lips. And lingered. A slow exhale left his mouth, and for a second, just a second, I thought he might say something. A joke. A denial. A way to break whatever had just settled between us. Instead, he straightened, rolling his shoulders. "Fan's gonna need a new capacitor," he said, voice lower than before. "You can grab one at the hardware store. I can help install it when you get it." I nodded, but the moment had already stretched too long. Something had shifted. He grabbed his shirt from the couch, tossing it over his shoulder before heading toward the door. But before he stepped out, he turned back, his eyes dark and unreadable. "See you around," he murmured. And then he was gone, leaving nothing but the scent of sweat and sawdust behind. I exhaled sharply, raking a hand through my hair. I was in trouble. The next evening Daniel was back. I hadn't expected him so soon, had barely come to terms with whatever had passed between us. But there he was, standing at my door with a capacitor in one hand and a beer in the other, like he belonged here. "Figured I'd save you a trip," he said, stepping inside before I could invite him. "Plus, I was already at the hardware store. Might as well finish what I started." I knew I should have said no. Should have told him I could handle it myself. But I didn't. "Yeah," I said, closing the door behind him. "Might as well." Daniel got to work without another word, climbing the ladder, his broad back flexing under his shirt. I tried not to watch. Tried not to let my thoughts drift to places they shouldn't. "You good down there?" he asked, voice tinged with amusement. I realized I had been staring. "Yeah. Just, yeah." He smirked but didn't press. Instead, he worked in silence, the occasional sound of metal clinking against metal filling the space between us. "You know," he said after a moment, "I used to mess around with this kind of stuff all the time when I was younger. My old man taught me." I seized the distraction. "Didn't know you were close with him." Daniel shrugged. "We were, in our own way. He was a hard-ass, but he taught me a lot." A pause. "Guess I just wanted him to be proud." Something in his voice made my chest tighten. "He would be," I said, surprising myself. "You're good at this." Daniel looked down at me then, something unreadable flickering behind his eyes. "Yeah. Yeah." The air shifted. I felt it. I know he did too. Daniel finished up quickly, climbing down the ladder with an ease that made everything he did seem effortless. When he stepped past me to grab his beer, his shoulder brushed against mine, deliberate. I knew I wasn't imagining it this time. He cracked open the bottle, took a slow sip, then held it out to me. "Want some?" I hesitated before wrapping my fingers around the neck of the bottle, our hands briefly touching, lingering. His gaze flicked to mine, heavy and unreadable. I could feel it stretching between us, thick with something neither of us wanted to name. I took a sip, the cold liquid doing nothing to ease the heat crawling up my spine. When I handed the bottle back, his fingers brushed mine again, another choice. Another test. This time I didn't pull away. Neither did he. "You ever think about it?" Daniel's voice was lower now, rougher. My throat went dry. "Think about what?" He took another slow sip of beer, eyes locked on mine. "What it's like." I knew what he meant. Knew exactly what he was asking. I forced out a breath. "You're straight, Daniel." He let out a low chuckle, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah," he murmured. "Guess I am." He said it like he wasn't so sure anymore. I should have stopped it there. Should have said something to break whatever had settled between us. But then Daniel set the beer down, stepping closer, his presence overwhelming. "Tell me to leave," he said, voice barely above a whisper. I opened my mouth, but no words came. Because I didn't want him to. The first touch was tentative, like we were both waiting for the other to pull away. His fingers ghosted over my wrist, testing, searching. When I didn't move, he exhaled sharply and stepped closer, his chest brushing against mine. I could hear his breathing, feel the way it hitched when I lifted my hand, pressing my palm against the solid warmth of his shoulder. We shouldn't have been doing this, but we were. Daniel's hand curled around the back of my neck, his thumb brushing over my skin in a way that sent a shiver down my spine. "This is a bad idea," he muttered. I swallowed hard. "Yeah." Neither of us moved. And then, he kissed me. It was tentative at first, like he was still trying to figure out what this meant. But when I didn't pull away, something in him shifted. The hesitation disappeared. His grip tightened and suddenly, he wasn't holding back. The kiss deepened, raw and hungry, his body pressing against mine like he had been fighting this for too long. I groaned against his mouth, my fingers digging into his back, pulling him closer, too close. And just like that, the line was gone. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. Daniel's hands were still on me, his forehead resting against mine. Like he wasn't ready to let go. "Shit," he muttered. I exhaled shakily. Yeah. He didn't move. Didn't step away. Instead, his fingers skimmed my jaw, slow and deliberate. Testing. Wanting. "I should go," he murmured. I nodded, but neither of us made a move to separate. A beat of silence. Then, he kissed me again. Harder this time. More certain. And that was the moment I knew. This wasn't a mistake. It was just the beginning. The moment the door shut behind Daniel, the weight of what had just happened settled over me like a storm cloud. My lips still tingled from his kiss, my skin still burned from his touch, but reality had already begun creeping in, sharp and relentless. And Daniel wasn't supposed to be an option. I paced the living room, running a hand through my hair, but there was no undoing it now. My reflection in the darkened window stared back at me, flushed skin, wide eyes, lips slightly swollen. I had kissed him back. I had wanted it, needed it, and worst of all, I wanted more. The next morning, I woke to a text from Ethan. A simple message. A normal one. But it made my stomach churn. I had spent the night tangled in thoughts of Daniel. Not Ethan. Not my boyfriend of 2 years. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the keyboard. Then, before I could think too hard about it, I typed back. "Yeah. Just busy. See you later." He sent back a heart emoji. And just like that, the lie slid into place, smooth and practiced. That evening, I saw Daniel again. I wasn't expecting him, but as I stepped out onto my balcony with a beer in hand, I caught sight of him sitting on his porch, staring at the darkened sky. For a second, I thought about going back inside. But then he looked up, held my gaze, and without thinking, I made my way down the steps toward him. Neither of us spoke right away. I settled into the chair beside him, the air between us thick with unspoken words. It wasn't awkward. It was worse. It was charged. He took a long sip from his beer before finally saying, "You good?" I let out a breath. "I don't know." Daniel exhaled through his nose, staring straight ahead. "Yeah. Same." We sat there in silence, the hum of distant traffic filling the space between us. I should have said something to make it easier. A joke, a meaningless comment. Instead, I said, "Do you regret it?" His grip tightened around the bottle, his jaw ticking. "I don't know." Another beat of silence. Then, quieter, "Do you?" I turned the question over in my head, searching for the right answer. The honest one. Finally, I said, "No." His shoulders tensed. Then he let out a slow breath, shaking his head like he hated that he felt the same. After a long pause, Daniel muttered, "I don't do this." I studied him in the dim light. "Do what?" "This." He gestured vaguely between us, frustration bleeding into his voice. I'm not like that." The words stung in a way they shouldn't have. I forced my expression to stay neutral. "You kissed me, Daniel." "I know," he admitted, voice low. "And I can't stop thinking about it." That admission wrecked me. Because I felt the same. The next time it happened, neither of us could pretend it was a mistake. Daniel showed up at my door, the excuse barely formed before I was pulling him inside. There was no hesitation this time, no uncertain pauses. His hands found my waist, mine tangled in his hair, and the kiss was desperate, borderline reckless. This wasn't an accident. This was a choice, and we both knew it. Afterward, we lay there in the dim light, neither of us speaking. Daniel stared at the ceiling, expression unreadable, chest rising and falling in slow, even breaths. I wanted to say something, anything, but words felt useless. Finally, he murmured, "What now?" I swallowed. "I don't know." His fingers traced absently over my arm, like he was trying to memorize the shape of me. Like he knew he shouldn't want to. Then, quietly, "Do you love him?" The question hit me like a punch. My throat went dry. "Ethan." Daniel didn't look at me, just waited. I opened my mouth, but no words came. And that was the answer. Some time later, Daniel sat up, rubbing a hand over his face. "This is fucked up," I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "Yeah." But neither of us moved. Neither of us left. Because no matter how wrong it was, we weren't ready to stop. Daniel sat on the edge of my bed, shoulders tense, fingers tangled in his hair. Neither of us spoke. The weight of the past few weeks pressed down on us, thick and suffocating. We had crossed too many lines. And now there was no going back. I exhaled slowly, pulling the sheet around my waist. "We can't keep doing this." Daniel's head lifted slightly, but he didn't turn to look at me. His hands curled into fists against his thighs, tension radiating from his body. "So what?" His voice was rough, edged with something I couldn't name. "We just pretend it didn't happen?" I wanted to say yes. Wanted to tell him we could erase it, go back to how things were before. But we both knew that was a lie. The silence stretched between us, thick and charged. Finally, Daniel let out a low chuckle, but there was no humor in it. "You know what the worst part is?" I swallowed hard. "What?" He turned then, his eyes meeting mine, raw and unguarded. "I don't want to stop." The confession sent something sharp through my chest. Because I didn't either. But I had to. I ran a hand over my face, exhaling through my nose. "Ethan doesn't deserve this." Daniel's jaw clenched. "And what about what we deserve?" I stiffened. "What?" His gaze darkened. "What if this is real? What if this," he gestured between us, frustrated, desperate, "is more than just a mistake?" I swallowed hard. "It doesn't matter." "Of course it matters," Daniel snapped. He pushed off the bed, pacing the room like he was trying to outrun his own thoughts. "You keep acting like this is some accident, like we just slipped up. But that's bullshit." I sat up straighter, heat rising to my face. "Daniel." "No," he cut me off, voice sharp. "Tell me I'm wrong. Look me in the eye and tell me this doesn't mean something to you." My throat tightened. I couldn't say it. Because we both knew the truth. Daniel ran a hand over his face, exhaling shakily. "You don't love him." The words hung between us, heavy and damning. I wanted to argue. Wanted to say that love wasn't just about feelings. It was about history, about commitment, about not doing exactly what I was doing right now. But I couldn't lie. Not to him. Not to myself. "I need to end it with Ethan." The words tasted foreign, like I had been avoiding them for too long. Daniel stilled, his gaze locked on mine, searching. "Are you saying that because you want to? Or because you feel guilty?" I held his stare, my chest tight. "Both." He nodded slowly, absorbing my answer. Then he turned away, shoulders tense. "And after that?" I hesitated. "I don't know." Daniel let out a humorless laugh. "Right." I stepped toward him, placing a hand on his back. "This isn't easy for me." His muscles tensed beneath my touch. "It should be." I swallowed hard. "What do you want me to say?" "That you want me." The words were raw, unfiltered, undeniably honest. And for once, I didn't hesitate. "I do." Daniel turned then, and in one swift motion, he pulled me against him, his grip firm, demanding. His lips crashed against mine, not soft, not hesitant, but hungry, desperate, real. This wasn't a mistake. This was a choice. When we finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against mine, his breath uneven. "Then stop fighting it." I exhaled shakily. "I have to do this right, Daniel." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded, stepping back. "Okay. Just one word." But it meant everything. The next day, I met Ethan at a quiet cafe. I stared at my coffee, the guilt sitting heavy in my stomach. Ethan was talking, his voice light, casual, like nothing had changed. Like I hadn't already decided to leave. And that was the moment I realized I had been gone for a long time. I just hadn't admitted it yet. I set my cup down, inhaling deeply. Ethan. He looked up, eyes warm, trusting. I swallowed the lump in my throat. We need to talk. That night, I knocked on Daniel's door. He opened it slowly, his gaze unreadable, like he wasn't sure what I was about to say. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then, finally, I spoke. It's done. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes softened. I stepped inside, and this time, there were no doubts. No guilt. Just us.